They say temptation never kicks the door down. It doesn't roar or flash warning lights. It slips in like dusk, barely noticeable at first. A soft draft under the door, a shift in the light, something you ignore until it's everywhere and you can't remember when it started. Sometimes it smells like your favorite red wine. Sometimes it sounds like a joke that lands too deep. Sometimes it's the face of a man you've known for years but never really seen. Sometimes it looks like your husband's closest friend sitting at your kitchen table in our New York apartment like he's always belonged there. I still remember the air that evening like a second skin. Heavy, almost solid, thick enough to touch. The kind of quiet that feels safe on the surface, like a blanket over your whole life. The lights were low and warm, casting soft amber shadows across the walls. The kids were gone for the weekend at my parents' place upstate. John was away on business. The dishwasher hummed in the background. Everything looked calm, ordinary, nothing special. Looking at that scene, you'd never guess someone's life was about to split right down the middle. But that's how it happens, isn't it? The biggest changes never announce themselves. They walk in wearing familiar clothes in rooms you know by heart. That's how it happened to me. I've lost count of how many times I've replayed that night in my head. Months have passed, yet it still spins like a film reel. Not just the obvious parts, the kiss or the touch, but every small thing before it. The way my stomach fluttered when Lucas smiled. The way my voice changed when I spoke to him. The way I ignored that tiny warning deep in my chest whispering that this was no longer harmless. I used to think of myself as a woman who had it all under control. Responsible, loyal, sensible, married with 2 kids, a mortgage on our Brooklyn apartment, and a backyard big enough for swings and a plastic slide. From the outside, that life looked perfect on social media. The ideal family. You're so lucky. Lucky is a funny word when you're quietly coming apart. On the surface everything made sense. Inside I felt like a sweater with a loose thread. You don't mean to pull it. You just fidget, pick at it, roll it between your fingers, until one day you look down and realize it's unraveling inch by inch. And you can't even remember when it began. He saw it before I did. Not my husband. His best friend's name is Lucas. He's known John since their college days at NYU. They shared cramped dorm rooms, cheap beer, secrets, and stupid mistakes. When I met John, I met Lucas a few weeks later. He was at our wedding, in our photos, held our newborns, grilled burgers in the backyard, and laughed on our couch. He had woven himself so tightly into our life that he felt like part of the furniture. Familiar. Safe. At least that's how I saw him. Until I didn't. Until that night when I realized Lucas looked at me the way no one had in years. Not in some dramatic movie way. It was quieter, almost gentle. The way his eyes followed my face when I talked. The way he actually heard my words instead of nodding while scrolling his phone. The way he asked how I was and waited, like he believed the answer might be more than fine. I never planned to become the woman who crosses invisible lines. I didn't wake up thinking today I'll destroy the version of myself I thought I was. Life doesn't give you time for announcements. It just holds up a mirror when you least expect it and waits to see who you really are when no one's watching. That night in our dimly lit kitchen I met another version of myself. I had been buried under years of laundry, dishes, school calendars, and quiet disappointments. The version that wanted something more than being reliable. The one that wanted to feel chosen. John isn't a monster. Let me say that clearly. He's a decent man, responsible, steady. He works long hours at his finance job downtown. He pays the bills on time. He shows up at parent-teacher conferences and fixes the leaky faucet when I remind him enough times. But somewhere between surviving and routine we stopped seeing each other. There were no big fights, no slammed doors, no sudden changes overnight. Our love didn't burn out in a blaze. It faded like a bulb that doesn't pop, just slowly dims until one day you realize you've been sitting in half-light for years. He came home exhausted, shoulders slumped, eyes glued to his phone. A quick hug, an absent kiss on the cheek, then he dropped onto the couch scrolling emails and news until it was time for bed. When I tried to tell him about my day he listened with that distant nod, making the right sounds in the right places but hearing nothing. After a while I stopped trying. We became efficient roommates with the same last name and shared calendars for the kids. You paid the electric bill. Can you pick Liam up from soccer? Don't forget Maya's dentist on Thursday. We touched only when passing in narrow hallways. There's a special kind of loneliness in marriage when you feel unseen. It's not the loneliness of being alone. It's standing beside someone who once knew your best self and realizing he stopped looking a long time ago. Then Lucas was there. At first he was just Lucas. Same loud laugh, same easy confidence, same habit of walking into our apartment without knocking. He brought takeout on game nights, tossed a football with the kids, and stole fries off our plates the way he had for years. I never thought twice about him. Then things started shifting, one small moment at a time. He lingered in the kitchen after dinner helping rinse dishes while John took another work call in the next room. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my stress, and then listened like my answers actually mattered. Really listened. You have no idea how rare that feels when you've been overlooked for so long. One evening we sat in the backyard watching the kids run through the sprinkler. The sky was painted orange and pink, and the grass smelled damp and sharp. John went inside to answer yet another call that lasted 40 minutes behind a closed door. Lucas handed me a glass of wine and said it so casually it almost sounded like a joke. You look exhausted, but somehow you're still stunning. The word hung in the air. Stunning. No one had called me that in years. I brushed it off, but something inside me stirred, like a light flickering on in a room I'd locked years ago. A harmless man doesn't make you rehearse conversations in your head before he arrives. I remember one afternoon watching Lucas through the kitchen window while he fixed the broken basketball hoop for the boys. His sleeves were rolled up, forearms dusty, t-shirt damp with sweat. My son was chattering beside him and Lucas laughed, head tipped back. At one point he looked up and caught me watching. His smile changed, softened, like it was meant only for me. I smiled back. That tiny exchange was nothing dramatic. We had touched 1,000 times without thinking. But this time my breath caught. The glass hovered between us and I couldn't make myself pull away. He didn't move either. We just stood there too long, holding the same glass, sharing the same space, not speaking, not pretending nothing had happened. That moment didn't turn into anything dramatic. We didn't kiss in the kitchen that night. No one walked in on us. We went outside. We laughed with neighbors. John finally appeared, apologizing for the long call. The kids were sticky from melting ice cream. The evening ended, but after that I couldn't pretend nothing was happening anymore. We never talked about the moment with the glass. Not the next day, not the next week, but something shifted almost imperceptibly. The air felt different when Lucas and I were in the same room. Our conversations grew a little deeper. Our jokes gained an edge. Our silences grew heavier. He started dropping by more often when John wasn't home. Always with some excuse. I left my hoodie here. Thought I'd bring those books we mentioned. Was in the neighborhood. Figured I'd say hi. Small, believable reasons that kept everything looking innocent on the surface. We drank coffee at the table while daylight filtered through the blinds. He asked questions no one had asked me in years. What are you doing just for yourself these days? Who did you want to be before life made its adjustments? When was the last time you lost track of time doing something you loved? Each question chipped away at the dust I had let settle over my dreams. I told him things I had stopped thinking about. How I used to paint. How I once stayed up all night finishing a canvas and watched the sunrise with wet paint still on my fingers. How I had wanted to open a tiny studio with white walls and big windows before I got pregnant earlier than planned. Lucas listened like those details were treasures, not trivial memories. He looked at me like there was more than a tired woman in leggings wiping crumbs off the table. Then came John's trip. 4 days. Meetings, presentations, client dinners. He rattled off his schedule at the kitchen table while checking his phone. I stood at the stove stirring pasta sauce, nodding at the right moments. You'll handle the kids? He asked absently. Of course, I answered automatically. I wanted him to look up. I wanted him to see the tiredness under my eyes, the knot of restlessness in my chest, the slight shake in my voice. But he just kissed my forehead out of habit and said, "You're amazing." The kids left for my parents' place that same afternoon. It had been planned weeks earlier. This will give you a little break, my mom said. I hope so. She had no idea how the word break echoed in my ears. Then the first night the house was empty, the silence felt unbearable. The ticking of the wall clock seemed too loud. Suddenly, I could hear the refrigerator humming. I wandered from room to room like a stranger in my own life. When the knock came, I jumped. I opened the door. And there he was. Lucas, leaning against the doorframe with a bottle of red wine in one hand and a small, almost uncertain smile. I figured you might not want to be alone tonight, he said. The lie I should have told froze on my tongue. I'm fine. I'm tired. I just want to rest. I could have said any of those things. Instead, I stepped back from the doorway. Come in, I said. We sat on the couch a little farther apart than usual. The television played something we weren't really watching. The lights were dim. With each glass of wine I felt warmth spreading through my veins. We started with easy stories, college memories, awkward moments, funny things John had done. At one point we laughed so hard tears came to my eyes. It felt so good to laugh that deeply and freely that I didn't even question why. Eventually the conversation slowed. The laughter faded. Between us grew a tension that had nothing to do with jokes anymore. You've been different lately, Lucas said, tilting his head and looking at me with that spark again. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, suddenly self-conscious. Is that bad? Was I that boring before? I tried to joke. He shook his head. No, you were never boring. You were just closed off. Now it's like you're stepping back into yourself. I started painting again, I admitted. Just a little. Nothing good, just paints and mess. His face broke into a smile. There she is, he murmured almost to himself. I felt my heart squeeze. A long pause stretched between us, full of words neither of us dared say. Then he took a breath and his voice dropped lower. Can I be honest? He asked. I should have said no. Instead I nodded. I've always admired you, he said. Even when we were younger, even when you and John first started dating, I wondered what would have happened if things had gone differently, if the timing had been different, if my life could have led me here. I felt the room tilt slightly. The television blurred. Every beat of my heart sounded too loud. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. No jokes, no masks, no casual smirk, just raw, open want that he no longer tried to hide. I opened my mouth to change the subject, to push him away, but nothing came out. He moved slowly, like he was approaching a frightened animal. He leaned closer, giving me every chance to pull back, stand up, laugh and say you're drunk, go home. I had 100 chances to stop it before it started. I didn't take any of them. When his lips finally touched mine they were gentle, hesitant, asking without words. And yes, God help me, I answered. I pressed into him. My hand found his neck almost without permission. The kiss deepened, softened, warmed, and it felt like someone had opened a window in the room. I convinced myself I didn't need air anymore. I told myself it was only a kiss, just one. No one was supposed to know, but we both already understood that nothing would ever be just a kiss again. That night an entire version of my life quietly collapsed without witnesses. You might think everything exploded right after. That we launched into a wild affair, sneaking around, booking hotel rooms, whispering in dark corners. But real wreckage is quieter. We didn't sleep together that night. Eventually we pulled apart, breathing hard, eyes stunned. Lucas swore under his breath and pressed his face into his hands. I felt my cheeks burn, my heart pounding in my ears. I should go, he said, standing abruptly. Yeah, I whispered. He paused at the door and turned. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have done that. I crossed a line. So did I answered. He nodded once, like the admission both weighed on him and brought relief. Then he left. The silence settled over the apartment again. You'd think that would have scared me, that I would have woken up the next morning horrified and cut all ties. But shame doesn't always arrive on schedule. Sometimes it comes later, slowly, after desire has already taken what it wanted. We tried to pretend nothing had happened. For a while it almost worked. Lucas stayed away for a bit. Fewer visits, shorter texts, more distance. I told myself that was good. Let everything settle. No one would ever know. Then one morning at breakfast John mentioned Lucas's birthday. We should have him over, John said, scrolling his phone. Just the three of us. He hates big parties anyway. We won't make it complicated. Order takeout. Maybe some wine. I felt my fork freeze halfway to my mouth. Sure, I managed. Sounds nice. That evening I took too long getting ready. I told myself it was just politeness, that you should look decent when hosting a birthday dinner. But I stood in front of the closet longer than necessary, choosing a dress that made me feel like I still existed beyond being a mom. I did my hair, lined my eyes, smoothed lotion over my legs like he might notice. When Lucas arrived at the door with a bouquet of flowers, my heart stopped. "These are for you," he said, meeting my eyes for a second before looking away. "Hostess gift. Tradition." John laughed. "He's lying. He finally learned good manners," he joked, clapping Lucas on the back. We ate, drank, and sang a half-hearted happy birthday while the kids giggled. Lucas played the clown, pretending to blow out the candles, and they dissolved into laughter. On the surface it was an ordinary, warm family evening. But every time our fingers brushed reaching for a plate or our eyes met across the table, it felt like a secret note passed between us. After the kids were in bed, John's phone rang again. "Work," he said, wincing apologetically. "I'll be quick." I watched him disappear down the hall. Heard the office door close. His muffled voice leaked through the wood. Lucas and I were left in the living room. Half-cleared plates sat on the table. Candles had burned down to small pools of wax. Soft music played from the speaker, almost melancholy. For a long time neither of us spoke. Lucas finished the last sip of his drink, watching the glass turn in his hands. I pretended to scroll my phone without moving my finger across the screen. Then he broke the silence. "For my birthday," he said slowly, "I want only one thing." My heart dropped into my stomach. "Don't be dramatic," I tried to joke. "You already have cake and flowers. That's more than most people get." He didn't smile. "I'm serious," he said. I set my phone down. "We shouldn't," I whispered, already knowing exactly what he meant. "I know we shouldn't," he answered.